Last month, I saw Clockwork Orange on the big screen, and my god, this movie is so freaking good.
Goodness comes from within. Goodness is chosen.
An exploration of the interplay between choice and morality, the film posits that stripping people of the capacity for evil doesn't cultivate moral beings so much as it erases humanity.
He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
But one of the most precious qualities of timeless art is its capacity to reveal new layers of meaning at different stages in life. With this viewing, I found myself contemplating a more nuanced aspect of this Kubrick masterwork, one that resonates with a lot of the discussions we've been having lately on the channel and on the Discord. I realized that the film goes beyond simply condemning the type of conditioning depicted in the Ludovico technique. The movie itself is an example of such ideological conditioning. Let's dive in. If you haven't seen the film recently, A Clockwork Orange follows Alex DeLarge, a charismatic sociopath with a penchant for classical music and ultra-violence. After a series of heinous assaults, Alex is arrested and chosen for an experimental rehabilitation program called the Ludovico technique. The treatment conditions him to associate violent thoughts with extreme feelings of nausea, effectively robbing him of the ability to commit aggressive acts, even in self-defense. People who Alex had previously wronged exploit his condition, and when Alex's suffering becomes too politically inconvenient for the ruling party responsible for the Ludovico experiment, they revert the process, restoring Alex's freedom. The end. Cinema is full of stories that conclude triumphantly by portraying bad guys losing their freedom in the form of incarceration or being stripped of their powers, so that feeling of exhilaration we feel when Alex regains his capacity for violence can't be solely attributed to a belief in universal freedom. Sure, there's a difference between limiting someone's environment and limiting someone's will, but I think there's something else at play that explains our curious reaction to Alex's cure. Truth is, we celebrate Alex's liberation at the end because, simply, he's likable. One of the reasons the film and Malcolm McDowell's performance is so legendary is because, well, it's not easy to convince an audience to identify with a deranged psycho. Yet, Alex undeniably possesses a stylish allure. There's a captivating charisma in Alex's demeanor, a certain flair to his speech, and a confident bravado to his movements. What A Clockwork Orange reveals is the extent to which we are all subject to be conditioned by aesthetics, or artistry, beauty, swagger, and fashion, that which stimulates us and resonates on a primal level. Art is all over this film, drawing our attention to the aesthetic realm. The camera often lingers on elevated, ornate, high-culture artistry. The Catwoman's house is full of, quote, important pieces of art.
It's a very important work of art.
Paintings adorn the corridors of Alex's hangout spots, defaced classic art is plastered in the lobby of Alex's flat, and the overall production design is futuristic and eccentric, with everything from clothes to furniture to milk dispensers designed in a way far removed from their practical function. Whereas the Ludovico scientists employ aesthetic forms like film and music to condition Alex against violence, the movie A Clockwork Orange does the opposite. It builds a character with such panache and style that we're conditioned to sympathize with a violent sociopath. Instead of a serum that induces illness at the sight of horrific violence, Kubrick serves us a different intoxicant, the cinematic form. Close-ups plunge us into Alex's subjectivity. Exotic, idiosyncratic voiceovers enmesh his thoughts with our own.
A nice, warm, vibrating feeling all through your gutty woods.
Production design, makeup, costuming, and choreography command our attention and tantalize our senses. The movie's emphasis on art isn't just arbitrary flair. It reflects how artful expression can turn brutality into a seductive performance, and how with just a little bit of style, we can be convinced to accept anything. In this sense, A Clockwork Orange is a meditation on how aesthetics, and more specifically cultural symbols like paintings, music, and films, can be manipulated for ideological purposes. The film highlights the intricate relationship between aesthetics and belief, revealing that art is one of the most crucial and powerful tools in strengthening ideological commitments. This is why Plato famously proposed that poets should be banned from his ideal republic. He feared that poetry could depict immoral behavior in such tantalizing ways that it could corrupt the minds of the young and perpetuate unethical acts. He recognized the aesthetic realm's profound ability to direct people's passions, so he mused that art should only be able to depict upstanding values. Kubrick, however, by juxtaposing extreme violence and, quote, high culture classical music, seems to suggest that elevated culture doesn't necessarily yield elevated morals, but why doesn't it? I mean, there's little doubt that Plato would approve of Alex's greatest passion, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, a piece that famously celebrates the universal dignity and brotherhood of mankind. Plato wouldn't be too happy to know that even art that promotes virtuous values can stimulate violent fantasies in a guy who gets off on that kind of thing. So what did Plato get wrong? Well, maybe it's not that he got it wrong so much as it is that things have changed. In his work, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, philosopher Walter Benjamin talks about how the advent of new technologies for reproducing art, such as photography and film, or in the case of A Clockwork Orange, proto-mini cassettes, led to a shift in the way art was experienced and consumed, which brought with it significant ramifications for the ideological and political spheres. The mechanical reproduction of art eroded what he termed the aura surrounding traditional artworks, which were tied to specific cultural and religious contexts. For example, imagine the only way you could experience the breathtaking Notre Dame Cathedral was to visit the building and attend a sermon. Back then, the architectural beauty, inseparable from its religious setting, maintained an aura that reinforced the intended ideological framework of Christianity. Now imagine it's 2024 and you get a Notre Dame postcard from your friend Bob. This rendering of the cathedral carries neither the weight nor the significance of seeing it in its original context. Chances are the religious associations won't factor at all in the way you interact with it. You'll probably just say, "Oh, cool, Bob is in France and he thought of us. How nice." The ability of the art to be mass-produced erodes its cultural and religious foundations. On the one hand, Benjamin was excited about the potential to erode the auras associated with works of art, as it opened an opportunity to divorce art from what he considered to be a parasitic dependence on bourgeois ritual. However, there was also a downside to the diminishing aura, as the ability to establish new ones, or false auras, could transform art into a potent tool for political manipulation. Mechanical reproduction of media facilitated what he called the aesthetization of politics, where political movements could exploit the captivating allure of images to advance their agendas. In the 20th century, fascist regimes were able to harness the power of mass media and visual imagery to create a cult of personality around their leaders, glorify their ideologies, and quell dissent. Alex's obsession with Beethoven's Ninth illustrates how, in a modern, or in the case of the movie, futuristic context, art has the capacity to be repurposed for radically diverging ends. To put crudely, it's a lot harder to pleasure yourself to fantasies about violence while listening to Beethoven if you can only hear it at a concert hall with a full symphony orchestra. But with the ability to pop it into the mini proto-cassette player or whatever, the transcendent beauty of Beethoven can be integrated into many more contexts and thus redirected to many more purposes. Purposes that Plato would definitely not approve of. In his feature-length video essay, The Pervert's Guide to Ideology, my favorite philosopher, who I always talk about, Slavoj Žižek, claims that there's something unique about the universal adaptability of Beethoven's Ninth. In a discussion about A Clockwork Orange and Beethoven, Žižek mentions how the Ode to Joy has been used by political parties whose messages are directly opposed to each other. It was considered an official song by the Nazi Party to celebrate great achievements. The Soviet Union claimed Ode to Joy as a communist song. It was even accepted and promoted in China during the Cultural Revolution. On the far right, it was the anthem of South Rhodesia, which was a country created just so it didn't have to abolish apartheid. While on the far left, it was adored by the leader of the Peruvian guerrilla faction, the Shining Path. Now, to be clear, Žižek is making a different and much more complex point here. In Žižek's analysis, Alex represents the element of society that makes ideological fantasies necessary. Part of his theory of ideology is the notion that every social order harbors inherent antagonisms or contradictions that cannot be integrated into the official ideology. For example, let's take a simple ideological construct that everyone understands, the American dream, or the idea that anyone can attain success and prosperity through hard work, regardless of their background or circumstances. However, the reality is there's a significant gap between this idea and the social reality of economic inequality. Despite the promise of equal opportunity, there are systemic barriers that make it really hard for some to achieve this dream, such as class disparities, racial discrimination, educational access, housing affordability, clean water issues, etc. Zizek calls this contradiction of the official ideology a symptom. This gap between the official ideology and the symptom must be constantly obscured or denied through ideological fantasies, such as, in this case, the perpetuation of the myth of existing perfect meritocracy or lionizing personal responsibility. Both things I generally support, but in the case of meritocracy, the notion that the economic system that currently exists is entirely built around it is, well, a fantasy. Another famous example Zizek references is the scapegoating of Jews during World War II. German society was a wreck. That's the symptom, and in order to maintain the appearance of ideological coherence, they had to create a scapegoat, or the ideological fantasy that all problems can be blamed on Jews. In Zizek's analysis, if the beginning of the final movement of Beethoven's Ninth, the Ode to Joy, is the official ideology, the part that everybody knows that preaches universal humanity and dignity, then Alex represents the second part, when the sentimental celebration stops and we transition to something much more playful and subversive. This is the part of the song playing in the scene where Alex is perusing the record store, feeling very in his element. This more subversive part of the piece is associated with Alex because it reflects his role as the symptom, the antagonism in society that the official ideology of universal brotherhood cannot acknowledge. In this case, the obvious fact that there are some people who cannot be included in this universal brotherhood of man, that there are exceptions. Zizek claims that Beethoven was super ahead of his time, and by seducing us with swelling feelings of brotherly love and then undercutting it, he was critiquing ideology, essentially pointing out how these sentimental claims to universal beauty ought not be taken too seriously, as they are very likely masking a failure of the social order. Anyway, back to aesthetics. Sorry, I get stuck on Zizek sometimes. The point is, art is one of the most powerful tools in consolidating ideological loyalties, and in a time where art can be completely alienated from its original context and redirected to other ends, humanity has perhaps never been more susceptible to ideological manipulation, and A Clockwork Orange is a perfect example of that. Like Alex, we're being indoctrinated in front of a screen, but instead of a serum making us feel disgusted by disturbing images, we are subjected to the manipulative craft of a master filmmaker and the artistry of one of history's greatest musicians, compelling us to root for a violent sociopath. Kubrick's point isn't just that morality needs choice, but also that morality can take a back seat to the aesthetic. If a war is properly glorious, it's justified. If a political party's branding is sufficiently compelling, it can be painted as righteous. After all, at the end of the movie, what exactly are we celebrating when he's cured? Are we rejoicing in an automaton regaining his humanity because he can choose again? Or is it darker than that? Are we celebrating an artist getting his paintbrush back? During that last moment when Beethoven's Ninth plays over Alex doing something wild, Kubrick proves the point that a song about the universal dignity of man can be used to celebrate the return of the sociopath.
I was cured, all right.
Hey y'all, thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content and want to support the channel, don't forget to check out my Ko-fi page where you can sign up for monthly donations or do one-off donations. Don't forget to hit me up on Twitch, follow me on Letterboxd, join the Discord. All them links are below. Also, after 2.5 years, I'm finally visiting my friends and family back in the States, so I'll be taking a break from streaming for about a month. But that just means I'll be back around the time the new South Park game comes out, which I'm super stoked about. So I'll see y'all in the spring, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.